for any of you, there are these QR codes. If you like any of these slideshows and you're like interested in checking them out on your own time, I've got those in hard copy over on the side table, but they're here for you. So this is Climate Connections. That's the one that was running when you first came in, kind of summarizing the syrup production for the year. And then we have, this is my welcoming one right here, and then the student presentation, which we're about to do, right? We're about to launch in. So tonight's process real quick, each of them is gonna have a section, right? And at the end of that section, they will ask you if you have questions for them so that you don't have to hold on to your thought for too long. I understand it's hard to hold on to your thoughts for a while. Okay, so you're welcome to take pictures at any point. I don't know if Mary said this, but if you could turn your phones off just to make sure that we don't get ringtone interruptions as we're going through, right? Students take questions at the end of their portion. And I don't know, is there a WEC survey this year? In years past, there's been a survey at the end. I don't know if that. Send that out. Okay, we'll send it out later. Yes. There you go. The other end. That one. Can you see better? Can you all see better now? Okay. Well, now you're all silhouettes. Yo, look now. You have never looked better. All right. So here we go, everybody. Let's dig in. There's Eva in a hole. We're going to start tonight with Joyce and Queen. I'll turn it loose.
Hello, everyone. Today, me and my classmates are going to be presenting Tapping into Sweetness. This is our presentation on the study of the Livonia campus sugar bush. And before I get started, I'd like to have my classmates introduce themselves.
I am Liz Brow. I am a junior.
I am Austin Bratcher, and I'm a junior.
I'm Isabel Burke, and I'm a junior.
I'm Ryan Travis, and I'm a senior.
Okay. So now, you may be wondering, what is a sugar bush? So a sugar bush is a forest of maple trees, which is used for maple syrup. And should I admit them? Okay. Okay. Which is used for maple syrup. And also, our presentation is a continuum of Katie Cooper and Esther Slocum's presentation from last year. How much sap can we produce on Livonia's campus? So we built our presentation off of this and had some points that were the same. And also I'd like to start off my presentation with talking about the history of our sugar bush. So in this first image, we have the 1938 aerial image of our sugar bush, which would be right here. And one thing that you have to note is that in the early 1800s, most of New York deforested a bunch of land for agricultural purpose. But as we can see here, they left this land to grow back as a forest. And if in this 1954 image, we can see our sugar bush more clear with sharp edges. And also I'd like you to bring your attention to this yellow line right here on this eastern border. And this field that's connecting the eastern border of our sugar bush. That later on will turn into a newer forest. And here's the same 1954 image and a new 1974 image where we have our sugar bush and also where our new forest will be slightly coming in. Also we have the addition of our Livonia High School. Here's another picture of the 1974 image and 2010 image where you can see where the new forests came in next to our sugar bush. And there's still the school there. And yeah, so you can still see the dividing line in between the old forest and the new forest. And just like in this 2021 picture, we can see the new forest and the old forest. But we don't see that line as clear as we did. But if we were standing right here looking south, this is the view that we'd have with our old sugar bush on the right and our new forest on the left. And that's us there for scale. And now that we know where our sugar bushes are, we had to plot out exactly where our maple trees were. And that brings me to how we mapped out our sugar bush. So this is an image of me and Lydia mapping out our sugar bush, which we made 1 acre plots, which is 208.7 feet by 208.7 feet. And we use a tape measure and a compass right here to measure out the distance and then make sure our plots were square with each other. And then we measured out north, and then we also measured out west, which here's a picture of Austin doing that. And we plotted out 2 1 acre plots, our blue plot and our yellow plot. And then we also plotted out, oh, no, sorry. So we only plotted out 2 plots this year. And in later years, we hope to plot out 5. And now that we've plotted out our area of our sugar bush, we have to identify which trees are sugar maples. So these pictures right here are several common maple tree leaves, and most of the common maple tree leaves have 5 lobes or points, like seen here. And the big difference in between the species is the sinuses or crevices right here. And if you look at the silver maple and the big leaf maple, they have deep cutting sinuses, while the sugar maple and the red maple have shallow sinuses. But if you look at the points on the sugar maple and the red maple, the difference between the two is that the red maple has more serrated points. Now, the one problem is with identifying maple trees by their leaves is we're not able to see the leaves during the winter due to the snow and no leaf coverage up in the canopy. So we can look at the leaf litter on the ground, and here's an image of sugar maple leaves. But another way we can identify maple trees is by the buds. So here's an image of a sugar maple, red maple, and silver maple buds. And another problem with this is that the trees only bud during early to late spring. So we don't really have the opportunity all the time to identify the trees by their buds. So that brings me to the identification of the branching patterns. Now, there's 2 different types of branching patterns. There's opposite branching and alternate branching. And the common trees with opposite branching is maple, ash, and dogwood, while common trees with alternate branching is cottonwood, this says cherrywood, and oak. And then if you see here, the opposite branching is when the branch is right across from each other. And alternate is when they're different, obviously. And then, but this was really helpful because it is always present on a tree, no matter the time of year. But the one problem is that we were able to figure out maple, ash, and dogwood for our opposite branching, but we couldn't figure out the exact species of it. So that brings me to identifying maple trees with the bark. So here's an image of a sugar maple at a younger stage with a quarter for scale. And then here's an older stage of a maple tree it starts off with smooth, unbroken bark, and then it works its way with more cracked and broken bark. And this photo is really important because if you look closely, you can see the peeling on one side of this piece of bark. And that is very crucial is a very significant identification of a sugar maple. And there's times where there's trees like this one and this one where we couldn't always figure out that it was a maple tree just from lack of experience and lack of knowledge. So that's when Bryce June came out and really helped us out. He really helped us out when we had a bunch of tough times trying to figure out what trees were really sugar maples. And he really dug deep into it and really helped us out. And I wanted to say thank you. So that brings me on to the tree anatomy. We talk about the inner parts of the tree. So to start off with the bark, which I just talked about, but the bark is the protective part of the tree, which is on the outer layer. And then in a layer, there's phloem, which the phloem is the part of the tree that flows sugar from the top of the tree down. And then there's cambium, which the cambium is important. It grows the width of the tree And it also is responsible for growing xylem to the inside and phloem to the outside of the tree. And then I'd like to talk about the annual rings. The annual ring is what is also called xylem, but you know as annual rings. And the xylem is also consistent of the sapwood and the heartwood. Now, the heartwood is the old xylem that's dead, but it's now used as a support for the tree, while the sapwood is the active part of the xylem, which is used for transporting minerals and water out from the roots up through the tree and is what we know now as sap. And now that brings me on to how we tap the trees, which I'd like to pass off to Isabel after I ask you guys for some questions. Yes?
How many trees are in the 1 acre plot?
So in the 1 acre plot, I'm pretty sure we estimated around 83 trees that we counted.
How much sap does that translate into?
Well, Austin will actually be letting you know about it later. Yes?
How many of those 83 trees did you tap?
We tapped a total of 13 trees. Yes?
What's the average age of the tree?
The average age, I'm pretty sure we estimated them around
Yes,
the 1800s, right?
there are definitely some trees from the late 1800s. And
Yeah.
average is tough.
So,
Yes?
Assuming none of those trees up there are planted, which means that's just the natural distribution that you would find pretty much any.
Yes. Yeah. It would be. Yes.
what criteria did you use to select the 13 trees from the 83?
So at first we kind of just we found some just trees that we just liked. We was in a good area. So yeah. Any more questions?
Very exciting.
Yes?
What do you get if you misidentify a tree and tap it?
That's a good question.
No, it's always a fair answer.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we do like deeper investigation into the trees before we tap them, just to make sure.
All right, Joey, that was awesome.
Thank you guys.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking to you about how we go about selecting our trees to tap. So here's a diagram of our woods. As Joey showed you earlier, all of the data that we've collected is all within this yellow quadrant here. This yellow line here shows the trail we would have to walk to get to our woods from the school, which is 0.25 miles. And I'm going to be talking to you about how we go about selecting our trees. So when we go to select our trees, there are three main things we look at. The first being the diameter of the tree, or the DBH, diameter at breast height, which is 4.5 feet above the ground. The second thing we look at is going to be the general health of the trunk of the tree. And lastly, we're going to look at the size and the fullness of the tree's crown. So now I'm going to be telling you about the process of measuring DBH. As you can see, this picture right here is a picture of me and Brian measuring one of our trees. And up here is the tool that we use, which is just called the DBH measuring tool. One side of this tool has a hook attached to it, which allows us to get a cleaner measurement of the tree, like secure tree. As you can see, this is what it looks like when you measure the tree. What we will do is this black line here is the starting point, and we will follow that starting point up to the top. And that will give us a measurement. This tree, for example, has a DBH of 16.25 inches. And this is a list of all the trees that we have tapped currently and their corresponding names. And yes, we do name our trees. Each name was selected by our environmental group and our climate connections group. Our largest tree is Big Bertha, clearly, and her DBH is 33.2 inches. And our second smallest tree is Charlie at 18.1. We do have a smaller tree, which is Dan Did It. We just don't have a picture of him currently. This is pretty much all of that information in a graph form. I want to draw your attention to this one. This graph is better because it is put into order smallest to largest. One of the important things that you need to know when tapping a tree, you cannot tap a tree if it has a DBH smaller than 10 inches. So that's going to be shown by this line here. And then there's going to be a second line, which anything above this line, you can put 2 to 3 taps into it, which that measurement is going to be 24 inches. Now these 3 trees right here, we definitely could have put 2 or 3 taps into these trees. However, we have Tim right here, and you would not want to put 2 taps in him just because that is very close to the fine line, and it just wouldn't be a smart idea. Now I'm going to talk about the general health of each tree that we tap, and what we are looking for to not tap. Now, as you can see in this picture right here, this is a very unhealthy tree. It has numerous holes in it from birds and bugs pecking away at it. This is a tree that you're not going to want to tap because it's not going to give you good production with sap, and it might not even produce anything because it's dead. Now this picture here shows splitting in a tree. You do not want to tap a splitting tree because over time, wind will blow those 2 branches apart, creating a bigger split, and then debris and water can get into it, which is just going to cause more problems, and eventually will end up killing the tree. So this is a better example. As you can see that clear split here. It's just important when you go about selecting trees to tap, you look closely at the trunk of the tree and especially higher up in the crown, which I'll get to later. This is a great example of why you definitely need to look up at the trees. So this picture here is a seemingly amazing tree. It is a great sugar maple, has a decent sized DBH, healthy. However, it has no top to it. So this was definitely a little bit of a mix-up because when me and Austin were going out selecting trees and all of our sugar maples in our forests, we were about ready to tag this tree. And when we walked to this tree, we could clearly see that we can't because it's dead. So that's going to bring us to the crown of the tree. Ideally, you want a widespread crown with finer branches, and that's going to promote a much healthier tree. These 3 pictures up here are a great example of this. As you can see, all 3 of these trees have a nice widespread crown with finer branches, which is just amazing. Now I'm going to talk about the process of tapping trees. Now, I don't know, many of you probably don't know this, but there are specific drill bits that you use when tapping a tree, which is going to be this one right here. So, but before I get into that, there is blue tape on this spile or this drill bit, and that is to map out exactly how far you need to go into the tree. And I'll talk about the importance of that later on. So this is going to be a close-up of these 2 different drill bits. Now, the tapping drill bit has a much more smoother edge, which is going to create a much more cleaner cut out of the tree, limiting sawdust and just stuff that you don't want in your sap. The regular drill bit has much more rigid ends, which you do not want because then it's going to have more sawdust in it that you're going to have to clean out, and it's just not going to be pretty. Now, this is the spile that we use. This is what the sap will flow out of. Here we have the drill we would use and the hammer that we would hammer the spile into the tree, sterilized, of course. This is the pick and the glove that we would use, both sterile. We would use the pick to pick out any sawdust that might be in the tap wound. And then here's the bag, which all the sap would fall into, and we would go and collect. So now I'm going to talk about the process of actually drilling into the tree. As you can see up here, we have Lydia, and I will soon show you a video of Joey drilling into the tree. Has no audio, and I apologize. But if the audio were there, you will hear that is one continuous motion. The drill did not stop whatsoever, which is why it is very important to have that blue tape so you know exactly how far to go into the tree. And you want it to be one singular motion because it's going to limit the sawdust and stuff inside the tap wound. This picture up here is going to be, this is the spile inside the tree, and then this is going to be a cross section of the bag onto the spile. Okay, this is why that blue tape is also more important. As you can see, there is a pool right here. There's a empty spot, which that is where all the sap is going to pool out of and then filter out to the spile. And here's a cross section of that. Now I'm going to talk about the necrotic lenses or scars left by the tap wounds. Each and every one of these dark spots is a previous drill hole. And all of that wood, all that dark wood is dead. Like, it's not going to benefit the tree at all. These, one of the reasons why they call them necrotic lenses is because every time you drill a hole, it is widest. The dead wood is widest once at the point where you drill it, and it fans outward and slowly gets thinner, as you can see here. Now I'm going to talk about productive tapping. Now this picture right here is a good example of productive tapping. You don't want the taps to get right next to each other. You don't want to be tapping into already dead wood because then you're not going to get a good sap production. Now these two pictures are up here are not productive tapping at all. As you can see, there are the tap wounds are very close to each other, which you're going to be drilling to dead wood. Again, this picture is 50-50. These ones are they're not productive tapping. They're very, very close to each other. And these ones over here are more spaced out. That is what you want to see. And these are back to necrotic lenses. When you do drill into a tree, the next season when you go to tap it again, you want it to be up or down 2 to 6 inches, and then left or right 2 to 6 inches after that. So you are guaranteed not to be drilling into already dead wood. Now we're going to talk about sustainable tapping. Now, in order to sustainably tap a tree, you want to give the wound time to heal. These two pictures right here are great examples. You can see this is the tap wound here, and it has had time to grow. The tree has had time to heal over top of this wound. Oh, you can't see it. Okay, so that's unfortunate. Can I? Oh, I can. Sweet. Okay. So here we have a great example of sustainable tapping. As you can see, they tapped the tree several years ago, and then now this tap hole had several years to heal over, and then they were able to tap it again. And that's great sustainable tapping. And this is all of the spots where we tapped our trees this year. We tried to tap all of our trees on the west side this year. And for the future, after learning what we did, we will be rotating half of the trees northward, and we'll be rotating the other half of the trees southward in order to have more productive and sustainable tapping of our trees. Which then, after I take questions, we'll bring it to Austin's slide. Now, any questions you have for me? Yes.
Why are Shudna and Epsilon so far off from the west?
So
Why Shudna red?
So okay, well, Shudna's red because we shouldn't have tapped it. Well, at least Sheldon thinks so. I have a different opinion, but so Shudna's red because we are still on the fence about continuing our research on that tree. the reason why we should have tapped it, according to Sheldon, it is you can see it from our driveway you can see it from our parking lot at school. So one of the things we were worried about is we were worried about kids messing with it, vandalizing it, poking holes in it, etc. And it is also very inconvenient when you go to collect it. Now, Shouldn't tree 9, and it is all the way at the bottom of our woods, whereas all the rest of our trees are higher up. So, but Shouldn't has the highest sugar content. So I think we should adapt it, but that's just me. And Epsilon is so far off from the west side because there was just there was a
Answer the question.
there was a oh my goodness, I'm blanking. No, there was a branch in the way, so we couldn't tap it on the west side, and it wouldn't have been it just wouldn't have been a great tap. So we chose to move it instead. Any other questions? Yes.
Is directional, is that all you want pipe for when you place your tabs? You can look at feed lines coming off the roots, spiraling into the tree at all.
What was that? Sorry.
When you went and tapped, you just went by directional,
Yeah.
north, south, east, and west.
Yep.
You didn't look at your feed lines off the roots coming up and spiraling into the tree.
Yeah, no.
Your sap lines.
Yeah, we were mainly just focused on like the directional point of it. Any more questions? Yep.
The trees that you chose, were they like distributed pretty well throughout the 1 acre plot, or did they kind of concentrate in certain areas?
So most of our trees did concentrate in a certain area. Yeah, definitely had it more concentrated. Shouldn't was like the main outlier, so.
Was that based on what you had chosen, or were those just where the best tapping trees happened to be?
So we kind of so there's a ton of maple trees within that plot. These were kind of just the ones, we were just excited. We're like, oh my God, we have all these sugar trees. And we kind of just tapped the ones closest. And I think as we were walking out of the woods, actually, Sheldon goes, you know what? We should tap another tree. And then that's how Shouldn't came into play.
He's cute.
Yes?
I saw Joel was tapping and drilling the tree.
Yep.
How long did it take from the time you pull the drill out to start producing sap?
Oh, instantly. So when, I do believe we will get into that later on, but when you do drill into the tree, the sap usually will start flowing quite fastly. Yes?
Are you using the same depth of drill regardless of the size of the tree?
Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
Great job, Isabel.
Good job, Isabel. That's what he said.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to be showing you guys the collecting part of our sugaring. So here, this graph shows the total volume per sap run that we collected. On the bottom right here, it shows all the days, and on the left, the y-axis, it shows the total volume collected in gallons. Over here on the right, we have the legend, which shows the tree numbers with their corresponding color. Over here, we have all the sap runs, where we went out and actually collected, and you can see what each tree produced with their actual color. Over here, you can see that there is no sap runs, and that was because it was either too cold, there wasn't enough sap to collect, or sap was frozen. In total, we had 43 sap runs, and we collected 306 gallons of sap, and that amounts to around 2,400 pounds and around 11 miles back and forth. Then I'll show you guys what went into preparing for every single sap run. Here we have our bucket, which we put tape on. On the bottom, we marked with a Sharpie so that we could have consistent bottom point for every single piece of tape. Here we have all of our materials. We've got graduated cylinder, we got our data book, we got 2 pencils and 2 Sharpies. I hope the 2 Sharpies account for every single time Sheldon let us forget Sharpies.
So you add about 3 miles to that list.
Here we've got our soil temperature thermometers, and we would use these almost every single time. Sometimes we just brought them up there and looked at them and didn't really do much with them. But most of the time we collected soil temperatures. And we've got a phone because phones were crucial and they helped a lot, helping us record data and take pictures. Here's just an overhead view of all of our materials. And then here is the magical pass that we call the Sapien Pass. I use this every single morning to get out of every single one of my first block classes. It worked a lot better than I thought it was. Come on. Here we have a picture of us carrying the buckets into the woods, getting ready to go collect. We've got a picture of Big Bertha when her sap bag was about to explode. And we've got a picture of this bag right down here because it just shows a really, really good picture of the sap bag. So you can see right through it and how clear the sap can be. Here we have our data book. When we would take our data book out, we would have to record the date, the day of the week, the time, temperature, and the forecast, as long as the people that were there that SAP run. And then we record all of our data in the book. We would record our flow rates, we would record our soil temperatures, and we would send everybody loose and we would do what we were assigned to do that day. Here is our actual collecting part. We would take the bags off the trees and we would carefully pour them into the buckets. And then we would bring our buckets over to our level platform where we would let it settle so that we can get an accurate marking of how much that tree produced. Here's the actual marking process. Once it's settled, we would go up and mark the bucket right at the top of the sap line so that we could see what it produced. And then this is what a bucket could look like after, I'd say, kind of mellow sap run. At least we would fill the buckets, but yeah. And then everybody's favorite part, hauling the full 5-gallon buckets back to the school. It was not fun. Here is our filtering process where we would filter all the sap because it was usually never clean because it would either have bugs or leaf litter, dirt, dust, whatever it figured out to get. We would filter it through our filter, which would clean it and collect all the dust and nasty stuff that you don't want in it. Then we would have to put a lid on it and mark it as raw sap and write down the date and the time. Then we would store it into our freezer, which was really cold. It was around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. It was not very fun going in there. And thank God the custodians and the cafeteria staff let us go in there every single day, every single morning, a lot. And they put up with all of our buckets that we had within the freezers. And then here's the graph that I showed you guys earlier. And then here's just a little chunk of the graph. And we are comparing that to our actual tape that we took off the buckets and put on our warboard. So this is actually it's the same. We just instead of on a piece of tape, it's in the graph, and you can see like tree 1, tree 2, and stuff like that on the graphs. Here is our warboard, and it shows every single time we went out there, collected sap, every single bucket that we used and used tape for is on this wall. And then with these spaces, you can see that each one of those spaces means it's a different sap run. We also got all of our boots because it was always muddy, no matter what. And then we've got our Climate Connections posters because
we needed a lot of help and kind of got it ish. And then here is a single day graph. So this is a single sap run collection of noon of February 22nd. And then we've got all the tree names on the bottom with their corresponding numbers. And then we have the total sap volume collected in milliliters. And then you can see this tree produced 5,750 milliliters. And then if you bring it over here, you can see that it's a pretty decent amount of sap. And if you go down to tree 2, you see how it's a little bit smaller amount of sap. And that, oops. And then that just corresponds to the graph. And then over here, Lydia will show us how we calculated and calibrated all the buckets and stuff. Any questions? Yes?
Did you collect multiple times a day? I noticed sometimes on your graph that it was like there was 2 graph lines from the same day.
Yeah, there was a couple days where I went out 2, 3 times, maybe 4 times that day and collected sap.
So it wasn't necessarily based on day, it was based on when you would go out there and retrieve in that time period.
Yeah. Yep.
How did your sap runs correlate to the weather?
When it got cold and it froze, and then when it got warm, there was a lot of hauling. Yep.
What's going on with Lumpy?
I mean, he had the work set out for us. We hauled him a lot, multiple times a day.
Sugar content.
I think he was actually kind of average.
So you did test sugar at the sap level?
Yes.
What did you use to test that?
Uh-oh. Sheldon?
Same thing you do with the measure the bricks.
Good to know.
So they, only a couple of them got to see that part of it. It was just curiosity on my part. We were busy enough getting them out of first block class and second block class. And we did go out at night, so there were times where students with headlamps on up in the woods at 10:30 at night. So that was cool.
Any other questions?
Oh, is that total production throughout the season?
This graph is showing a single day of February 22nd. But then this graph shows the total season collection, if it wants to work.
Were there any differences, like if you had collected during the day and then gone at nighttime? Like, was there more? Okay.
Those are great questions.
Okay.
You guys are doing exactly what we were hoping. You're leading in. Great job, Austin.
Anybody else? Okay.
Background.
Yeah, let's just take a quick interrupt here and see if we can move. I'm wondering if that. What's that? I don't want to open the chat. I want to get rid of this thing. Can we do that? Okay. Can't get rid of the scribble. That's my mom's scribble. She's gonna be horrified when she sees that later.
Okay. Chill out, bud. So I am showing you guys how we got all of the measurements. So basically we wanted to see if we could trust the bucket measurements, and so we taped a piece of paper to the sides of the buckets and we poured 1,000 milliliters of water into the buckets at a time, marking off each 1,000 milliliters, making our own calibration sheet. It was a long process. You could see right away that these buckets were just a little bit off. They actually gave us less. They actually gave us less of a measurement than our own calibration sheet did. And so we had to go through and remeasure all of the sap runs that we did. It was terrible. Okay, so using the calibration sheet, we kept it at the bottom of the tape and we just measured out how much sap was between the lines. As you can see right here for the first one, there was 4,000 milliliters in it. And so after doing all of this, we put this into our data book. And after putting it into our data book, we made a spreadsheet. This spreadsheet is going to show you the tree numbers, the date and times we got the sap, and how much sap we got on that date, on that time, and during that time. Using that spreadsheet, we made our charts. And this chart is the total sap volumes per tree from date 1/27/24 to 3/6/24. This chart is going to show you the sap volumes on the side right here, and it is in gallons. And these are all of the names of the trees down here. And Barb kind of looks like a dud here, giving us our lowest at 9.7, and Lumpy at 43.5 gallons. But all of these trees were tapped on different days, with blue columns being tapped on 1/26/24, giving them 39 days to produce, with Lumpy, Hines, and Shaggy tapped on 2/2/24, giving them 32 days to produce, and Bertha tapped on 2/23/24, giving her 11 days to produce, and Barb tapped on 3/3/24, giving her only 3 days to produce. And so since she only had 3 days to produce, we decided to dive deeper and look at the daily average sap volume of all of the trees. So this next chart is basically the same chart as before, but it has the average daily production. And for the 10 trees that it is showing right now, we all tapped those trees. All of those trees had 30 days of production, and they all averaged out around a gallon, with Lumpy at the top with 1.8 gallons. Now looking at Barb and Bertha, they took over by a long run. Sheldon likes to call them freaks. And so looking at them, they had the highest daily production, and we think that's because they were tapped like later in the season, and all of the trees that we have tapped have always had a higher flow rate right after we tap them, rather than if they were tapped a couple weeks beforehand. Or we think it's because of the temperatures, because it was later in the season when we tapped them, and so the temperatures were higher because we didn't have a very good winter this year. And it kind of sucks. And so something else we wanted to look at was the flow rates during the day, which will lead us to this slide. So to measure the flow rates, we put a graduated cylinder that is right here under the tap of the tree, and we timed it for a minute to see how much sap we gathered in the graduated cylinder. This video will show you that process. When we took this video, this is a tree we just tapped like right before this video, and so has extremely high flow rate compared to the other ones. And so after we looked at the flow rates, we wanted to know if the tree size or the temperatures had any control over these. And so we looked at the DBH versus seasonal average flow rate, and this is the entire season from 1/27/24 to 3/6/24. The DBH is the brown columns. Me and Sheldon had a debate over the color. And the average flow rate is milliliters per hour, which you could see on the right. You can see right here. Those are the blue columns. And looking at these ones, it kind of looks like it has a little bit of a relationship with all of the DBH going up and the average flow rates going up the same time that the DBH goes up. And so give me a second. I'm panicking a little. And so and then bringing Barb in, she pretty much ruined that relationship. And then we brought Heinz in. Heinz just wasn't a good producer. We don't know why. We aren't sure why. And so we decided that DBH affecting the average flow rate was kind of inconclusive. And so we looked at temperatures. This chart is the measured flow rates with Tiny Tim in blue, Shaggy in red, and Lumpy in yellow. And on the left is the flow rates in milliliters per minute. And on the bottom are the times of the day, which is 7:55, 2:30, and 7:30. And so this is basically what an average day of production looks like for the trees. And here are the temperatures for that day. So as you can see, we actually almost went up to, actually we did peak 80 on that day. And so all of the sap went up super high when we peaked 80. And then it came down as we went back to 40. And it kind of had the same temperature in the beginning of the day and the end of the day. But this next chart that I'm going to show you is just another day, but it's basically the same chart. So Tiny Tim seems to follow the same trend as the chart before, peaking in the middle of the day and then going down in the end of the day. But Shaggy and Lumpy, they didn't want to do that. And so they just continued going up. We really aren't sure why. But as you can see, the temperature kind of didn't go as down. The chart on the right, the temperature at the end of the day wasn't really around the temperature at the beginning of the day. So we kind of assumed it was because of that. And so we decided to look at the temperatures for the entire season that we did these sap runs. And this chart is the average daily temperature versus total daily sap volume. The total volume is the blue columns down here, and the average daily temp in Fahrenheit are the red columns up here. And the average daily temp is on the left, and the total volume is on the right. Well, looking at this, in that black line is actually showing us when the temperatures dip down below freezing. And so when we were looking at this chart, we realized that all of the sap volume like kind of mirrored the temperatures a little bit, because when the temperatures are at a peak, the sap is also at a peak. And when the temperatures go down, the sap volume also goes down. And during that entire week right here, we got no sap that entire week. That was a break. We were happy about it. And so we decided to put these little data loggers on each side of the tree. And Brian will actually explain more about this to you. And so knowing the temperature had something to do with it, something to do with the control of how the sap was, we decided to study the temperature on different sides of the tree. And Brian will actually take over to explain this study to you. Any questions?
Earlier,
Did the ground have anything to do with the amount of sap you got, because the ground temperature at lower points on the earth is different temperature. Like if you go 4 feet in the ground, it doesn't freeze.
Yeah, this is DBH. This is the size of the tree. What was your question?
I remember earlier that you had talked about the canopy of the tree. Did you at all look at like the comparison of like if it had more access to sunlight and had a higher sap flow, or is that not one of your variables?
That's not something I did specifically, but I think we did look at how much sunlight it had. Any more questions? Right.
I'm going to be talking about the data loggers that we used. They're from Hobo Connect and they're from Hobo Onset and our Bluetooth for downloading the data. The blue one right here is a temperature logger, and the green ones over here are temperature and light logger. They are waterproof for up to 30 feet under the water. And for the next few slides, I'm going to tell you how to program the logger to collect data. The first step is to download the app, which is called Hobo Connect. When you first open the app, you will get a warning of something that no one reads at all. And then it will start scanning for the loggers. In order to activate the logger, you tap the middle where if you press it 5 times, it should eventually turn on. It is the hardest thing to turn on in the world. And then it will just pop up right here. Once you click on it, you will get this page if you haven't already configured it. Otherwise, this will be stop. Then you just want to press in order to start configuring it, you press that and you will get the page. You can name it. This one was on Lumpy on the north side. And then you can also put it in a group. The group that we chose was Livonia campus because Sheldon stole some of the loggers. You can also set the login interval for however, like 1 second to 1 year. We had 10 minutes because Mr. Sheldon wanted to capture the eclipse on one. You can choose when to start it, like on a specific date and time. You can also choose when it stops logging if you wanted to stop logging. This square is where our 3 research trees were that we decided to put loggers on. We have Lumpy, Hines, and Shaggy, and they're on different elevations because we wanted to see like if elevation played a role with the air temperature and that stuff. So our data loggers are 4.5 feet above the ground, tied with string because we had nothing else to put with it. And for Lumpy, it has a temperature logger on the north and south side. For Hines, it has a light and temperature logger on the cardinal sides, which is north, south, east, and west. And Shaggy has a temperature logger on the north and south side. They are organized from the highest in elevation to the lowest in elevation. And this is now how we download the data. First, we all crowd around a tree and press the buttons. And then we press download. And then when we go to put it inside of the drive, this will pop up after we press the maple tree study. We then press Hines because this is Hines tree. And then we put it with the pendant loggers. Then after that, in this example, we did the east side of the tree. And then you just stick it in with the other graphs. A graph would usually look, well, the graph would usually look like this. Unless if you're me, then you get an actual graphic time for some reason. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there'll be over 2,000 sections of over here. Very long, and you have to download all the data previously each time. So we have duplicate data if you need any. You've already seen this graph, so I won't go too much into it, but the future graphs inside of the slideshow will focus mainly on the 25th of February to the 29th of February of 2024. First up, we have Lumpy's air temperature on the north and south side with time on the bottom and temperature in Fahrenheit on the left. As you can see, the south side is much higher than the north side usually, except for over here where it was usually cloudy because of the eclipse. That's the only reason why it was cloudy. I'm telling you. But we also took some of the differences, the temperature, and which averaged at 11.3 degrees Fahrenheit. And for the next one, we have Heinz tree, which is basically the same graph, but with Heinz data, which we did the same exact thing, which we got an average of 15 degrees Fahrenheit for this average. And then we did Shaggy's side with same setup with an average of 16.3 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we have Heinz cardinal sides with north still being blue, south is still red, east is yellow, and west is green, with south still being highest, north is the lowest, and east and west are somewhere in between. But we concluded that there is a higher sap production on the south side because of the warmer temperatures, which means more sap flow. And now we have the north and south side of all three trees with Lumpy being blue in both graphs, Heinz is red in both graphs, and Shaggy is yellow in both graphs. Time is still on the bottom and temperature is still on the left. I don't know why that's there. No, the date. But what we concluded from this is that the elevation in the trees did not impact the temperature in the air around them, as seen because there was like no difference except for the south side at all. And for our conclusions, we have that the higher sap yields on the south side with warmer temperatures. Trees are busy even if they look like they're not and they're frozen. The Livonia has the potential for a profitable sugar bush. There's a reason it is called liquid gold. Besides it tastes good, I have learned today that it also costs a lot of money per gallon. More than gas.
What number, do you remember?
About $50, I think.
$50 a gallon.
For our future work, we are going to try and mark more trees in the map of the sugar bush. We're going to identify which trees are on our highest producers, and then tap 3 large trees on the north and south side. In order to ramp up production, we're going to work on the trails in the collection process and equipping the sugar shack. We have our lessons learned, which I have learned how to set up data loggers and put them into a graph.
It's about what you learned.
Oh.
Gotcha.
I didn't see that one.
That's okay. That was the last minute slide, everybody. Go back to your conclusions.
This one?
Yep. Any questions for Rod?
What do you mean by higher sap yield on the south side?
Since the temperatures are warmer because the sun is southern of us, because we're on the northern hemisphere, it's usually warmer on that side, so the sap flow will be higher usually, producing more sap. We need more sap to get and collect.
Are you guessing that, or do you know that?
You know it.
Why would that be? Yeah. Like, if the surface of the tree is warm on one side, does that cause the sap to flow all to one side?
Well, the temperature is spread out, so usually yes, unless if it's a tiny tree.
Did you put a temperature probe inside the tree to see what the internal temperature of the tree is, where the sap is flowing?
Not yet, but Mr. Sheldon will find a way.
Great idea. If you look at that cookie on the left, you'll notice that there's, and this was, if you look at places that have tapped a lot, you'll notice there's a higher concentration of taps on one side. Okay. Right? And then it's more than likely going to be the south.
Anything else? Yes?
1938, you think that they've always been pretty good? This is kind of just guessing.
I don't know.
I know it was curious that that area seems to have never been cleared, and you guys are still getting really good results today. So.
That's a good question. Yeah, it is an amazing sugar bush. I don't know, Bryce has probably seen a lot. Would you agree that that's pretty nice?
Pretty good.
Yeah. And so we are fortunate that it's unfortunate and fortunate at the same time. We had a really big tree that split up top and a big chunk is broken off. And so I think we're going to cut that one down and then look for tap holes inside of it. Because what we don't know is that we're assuming that they've been tapped. Past, we don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
So that's something to kind of check out.
Yes?
I have a fun question. I wondered if any of you guys have used any of the old equipment, you know, like a hand drill or the wooden spile. Have you guys ever tried
it with those things?
Really?
Just curiosity.
Yes?
Off after, how do you close a hole off after you guys get done using it?
The tree does it automatically.
Sap, you letting the sap do it itself?
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people take a piece of wood and they whittle it down and they kind of punch it into the hole and then they break it off. And it helps the tree heal.
Yeah. We don't do that, but yeah, I've heard people doing that. Do you know, Eric, if that helps?
Don't do that. It
Okay.
goes to the rock pocket in the tree.
I thought we were seeing rock pockets right there, all in black spots.
That hole will close within the first year.
Anything else?
You all did a great job.
Ryan, can you turn the lights on? And I would ask if the students and parents could stay afterwards so we can take an arranged group shot.
Right. So I'm Andy Earn from the Conesus Lake Association. I have some certificates of appreciation for these students. But first, I want another round of applause. A special thanks to Brian. He's a great friend of the Conesus Lake Association. We really appreciate all you do for these students, for the families, everybody in the community. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Lydia Rowe?
Oh, it's brown.
Oh, sorry. Why don't you stay right up here, okay? Austin? Thank you very much. Isabel? And Brian?
Oh, yeah, wait a second.
Oh.